16 billion passwords. Just let that number sink in for a second. 16 billion. That's the staggering figure Cyber News reported recently. Exposed. They're calling it a record-breaking data incident. So for this deep dive, we're going to unpack their findings, which are, well, pretty unique. It's a story that's actually still unfolding. Our mission here is to really get a handle on the scale and, frankly, the potentially terrifying implications of this massive data leak for you.
Yeah, and I think what's critical to understand right away is this isn't just, old data, old recycled credentials we sometimes see. Researchers are really describing this as, quote, fresh, weaponizable intelligence at scale. Mm. And it's mostly coming from lots of different InfoStealers. It's a different kind of threat.
And that scale you mentioned, it's almost hard to comprehend. The Cyber News team found 30 separate data sets, exposed data sets, each one holding, get this, anywhere from tens of millions to over 3.5 billion records.
3.5 billion in just one.
Right. And it adds up to nearly 16 billion unique login credentials total. What's really alarming here is that most of these data sets, they hadn't been reported before. Like, at all. There was one Wired reported, remember that? 184 million records. That wouldn't even make the top 20 list here.
Exactly. That unreported aspect is precisely what makes this so concerning. And what's really fascinating, I think, is the structure of the data. It's very consistent. You see a clear pattern, URL, then the login details, then the password.
Okay.
And that organized format. That's pretty much a signature of modern InfoStealers.
Right.
Malware designed specifically to just siphon off sensitive info right from people's computers. Efficiently.
So it's not just a random list of data points. It's structured. They're calling it a blueprint for mass exploitation, which means what? Direct pathways to taking over accounts? Identity theft?
Yep. Account takeover, massive identity theft potential, and highly targeted phishing scams.
Yeah.
This data basically opens doors to, well, pretty much any online service you can think of. Apple, Facebook, Google. Sure. But also GitHub, Telegram, even various government services logins were found in there.
Wow.
But the most alarming detail, for me anyway, is the inclusion of both old and recent InfoStealer logs. And crucially, these often come with tokens, cookies, and metadata attached.
Okay, tokens and cookies. What does that mean practically? That sounds worse than just a password.
It is, potentially.
Yeah.
Because these elements, they can actually be used to bypass multi-factor authentication. 2FA.
Bypass 2FA. How?
Well, think of these tokens and cookies like an active session, like you're already logged in or the site remembers you. They essentially prove you've authenticated before. And here's the critical part. Not all online services automatically invalidate these cookies or tokens even after you change your password.
Oh, that's not good. So changing your password might not be enough sometimes.
Exactly. It's a major vulnerability.
Okay, so let's clear something up. A question a lot of people might have. Were Facebook, Google, Apple passwords themselves leaked directly from their main server?
Right. Good question to address directly.
Because the cybersecurity researcher involved, Bob Diachenko, he stated very clearly, there was no centralized data breach at any of these companies.
Correct. And that's key. No central breach at the big tech companies themselves. But this raises that important nuance, right? What does it mean for you? So while it wasn't a breach of, say, Google's main database, these InfoStealer logs did contain the login URLs for services like Google, Facebook, Apple.
Meaning
if you, personally, got hit by an InfoStealer, maybe downloaded some dodgy software, or, and this is the big one, if you reuse passwords across different sites, then yes, your individual accounts on these major platforms could still absolutely be compromised using this leaked data.
Right. The InfoStealer grabs it from your machine, including your Google login if you logged in recently, and then it ends up in these massive data sets.
Precisely.
Okay, so given this huge threat, these direct pathways it creates, what are the immediate practical things you listening can actually do?
Well, the basics become even more critical now.
Like password hygiene.
Exactly. Because these logs make password reuse across all your services incredibly dangerous. Using a password manager, it's not optional anymore. You need it to generate genuinely unique, strong passwords for every single site. That's your first line of defense.
And not just setting them once, right?
No, you need to actively manage them, update them, especially if you have any reason to suspect you might have been exposed to an InfoStealer in the past. And maybe, run a good security scan on your systems. Look for signs of these things lurking.
Makes sense.
And zooming out a bit, there's an interesting observation from one of the Cyber News researchers, Aras Nazarovas. He suggests this whole discovery might signal a a broader shift happening in the cybercrime underground.
A shift how?
He thinks criminals might be moving away from messier methods, like just sharing stolen data dumps in, say, Telegram groups. And instead, they're starting to centralize this stolen data into more traditional, structured databases, like the ones found here.
Making it easier for them to use and sell.
Potentially, yes. More organized, more searchable. It makes these aggregated collections an even more potent, dangerous resource for attackers.
So, wrapping this up, what does this all really mean for your digital life?
Right.
It feels like a stark reminder, maybe, that these huge breaches are just part of the landscape now. Constant vigilance is required.
It really is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, maybe the final thought for you to consider is this. How will this constant evolution of cybercriminal tactics, like this specific shift towards centralized weaponized data, how will that force us, both us as individuals and, companies and organizations too? How will it force us to adapt our own cybersecurity strategies moving forward? It's a fundamental question we all need to think about.